Yes, the Pilgrims made port because they ran out of beer, then considered an essential and a healthy part of everyone's daily diet. Once ashore, they promptly erected a brew house and got to work brewing up a new batch to slake their thirsts. So Plymouth, Massachusetts ended up becoming the historic home of the Pilgrims because they needed to make a beer run. For the History Channel, I'm Sam Waterston.
We now return to Getting High, the history of LSD.
Physicians see LSD as a tool for understanding the mind. Philosophers see it as a key to the spiritual world. But the CIA theorizes that it can be a major weapon of war. In 1947, the Cold War has begun, and the newly created Central Intelligence Agency starts a dogged search for the perfect truth serum, or mind control drug. Research on LSD is done under the auspices of the top-secret MK Ultra program, which is designed to develop drugs as weapons of war. LSD receives more attention and study than any other drug. It is colorless, odorless, tasteless, and just a small quantity is unbelievably powerful. However, initial tests of the drug as a truth serum proved disappointing.
And LSD, though being very promising, also was uncontrollable. Some people would get paranoid, but then get blissful. You couldn't really interrogate them because the things that were happening in their mind were sending them elsewhere.
Not willing to give up on the drug, they decided it might be used for covert operations.
You could use it to confuse and embarrass political leaders like Castro or various dictators they wanted to get rid of by somehow slipping at them. So they'd slip it into a cocktail glass, and maybe the person would embarrass themselves and do all kinds of crazy things.
For LSD to work in covert operations, the element of surprise is crucial. To test its effects, government researchers covertly slip it to each other at the office.
And it was normally mixed with Coke or with coffee or milk or something like that. And it's tasteless and colorless, so the man wasn't aware of the fact that he was taking it.
But in fact, that did happen to quite a great degree in the early and mid-1950s. But they had to figure out how to use it properly as an espionage weapon. They would slip into each other's coffee, and then right away they say, oh, by the way, you've gotten it, better prepare to take that day off for work.
In November of 1953, this unorthodox research gets out of control during a work retreat at a hunting lodge in the backwoods of Maryland. Attending are CIA technicians and Army biological warfare scientists.
Some of these CIA people decided to administer LSD in the after-dinner drink for several of the scientists there who had no experience with LSD. And one of those scientists, Dr. Frank Olson, had a very difficult experience. You might call it a bad trip.
When he reports back to work the following Monday, he exhibits such erratic behavior that his Army superiors contact the CIA for help.
They spent a couple of weeks babysitting him, and then in early December he plunged to his death from a 10th floor of a hotel in New York City. It seemed that he committed suicide. That was the understanding later on when some of this information came out. You have to understand, this was a hot potato the CIA was dealing with. You had a scientist from the Army who had been given LSD as a part of one of these CIA experiments who ends up dying as a result. There's some controversy now whether he actually threw himself out of the window or whether he was pushed.
For more than 2 decades, the CIA hides the facts surrounding Olson's death. In the early 1970s, news reports provoked congressional hearings on the incident. President Gerald Ford personally apologizes to the Olson family. And in 1976, Congress passes a bill to pay $750,000 in compensation to Mrs. Olson and her 3 children. Yet the Olsons doubt the suicide story. They believe it is possible Olson was pushed from the hotel window because he posed a security risk. The family doggedly investigates the incident, and in 1994, after exhuming Frank Olson's body, an autopsy raises enough questions about foul play that the New York District Attorney agrees to reopen the case. But Olson's death fails to stop the CIA's so-called research in the 1950s. Its next project, Operation Midnight Climax, is truly fantastic. CIA operatives persuade drug-addicted prostitutes to slip LSD to unsuspecting customers in bordellos set up by the agency.
People from the CIA would sit behind two-way mirrors and watched all the action both the drugging and the sex. And this is not a great way to gather information from a scientific point of view, but this is what the CIA felt it had to do to get information on what would happen when LSD was given to people surreptitiously. And because they knew they had to know this before they would actually use it in this way in the operations.
Although extremely unethical, this type of secret operation is defended within the agency as being important for national defense.
It was one of their deepest held secrets that they were doing this, but because of the Cold War, they really felt no stone unturned, no weapon kept in the holster, no tool kept in the shed. If this was, this was going to be useful, we should study it. And there was also the feeling that if we're not studying it, the enemy is.
During this same time, another group is also researching LSD with entirely different results. Some in the mental health profession use it as a tool to tap the unconscious mind.
It seemed to speed up the process. You could give small doses of LSD in a typical shrink's office, and over the course of several weeks, do several years' work.
They learn that both the patient's moods and the setting in which the drug is administered have enormous effects on the patient's reactions. The drug seems to amplify everything.
You want to have a safe, supportive setting with beautiful aesthetic objects around, music and so forth, and set the setting are right, and you have the guidance and the assistance of others who are more experienced. Then you have the potential for really understanding how your mind works.
This helps explain why the CIA's experiments provoke hellish reactions from some people on LSD, while others have a blissful experience. By administering the drug in a hostile environment, the CIA almost guarantees a negative reaction. In 1957, a new word is coined by Dr. Humphrey Osmond to describe drugs like LSD and mescaline: psychedelic. It means mind manifesting, suggesting the drugs do not produce a predictable sequence of events, but instead bring to the surface thoughts and feelings from the subconscious. By the late 1950s, psychedelic therapy is the hot topic in the mental health community. Many who undergo it experience changes in personality, religious and philosophical beliefs, and sometimes lifestyle. In Hollywood, therapists make the drug available to a wide variety of celebrities, including Cary Grant, singer, dancer, actor Rita Moreno, and composer Andre Previn, and even Time Life publisher Henry Luce. Grant, who reportedly takes more than 100 LSD trips, claims LSD is the only therapy he's tried that gives him peace of mind. One California therapist, Dr. Oscar Janiger, realizes the drug is not always predictable.
I emphatically do not believe that everybody should have LSD. There are people who are living on the fringe of reality who will knock them over into a cocked hat.
When we continue, Dr. Timothy Leary begins his long, strange trip.
He felt that he had merged with the Godhead, that he had seen the light, and that it was his job now to turn on everybody.
In the mid-1950s, the Army's chief of chemical intelligence preached a new military doctrine of war without death and proposed testing hallucinogenic gases on American subways.
To discover more about the history of hallucinogens, please visit our website at historychannel.com. We now return to Getting High, the history of LSD.
Timothy Leary, the man whose name becomes synonymous with psychedelic drugs, first comes into contact with them while on vacation in Mexico in 1960. Recently appointed to a lectureship at Harvard University, he appears to have a golden future ahead of him in academia. Yet he is profoundly bored and dissatisfied. He's a man looking for something to happen.
Timothy Leary had one of the great midlife crises of our time. He was 40 years old when he first took the magic mushroom.
Leary first reads about the psilocybin mushrooms in an article published in Life magazine in 1957. Now, while suffering through a bout of vacation boredom and midlife crisis, he decides to try them. His encounter with the mushroom is nothing short of profound. He will later say it is without question the deepest religious experience of his life.
The idea came up when he had this life-changing, what he called a life-changing experience, in Mexico on a summer vacation with the magic mushroom, he decided to devote his life to exploring the potentials of this as a tool.
The effect is somewhat like looking through a microscope. Suddenly, when you look through a microscope, you discover that there's an invisible world around you that you hadn't known about before you did it. The same thing is true with a psychedelic drug.
Leary sets up the Harvard Psilocybin Research Project, a wide-ranging study to investigate the emotional and creative effects of this mushroom pill. Leary's timing couldn't be better.